Thank you for watching JULIETSIX. This is CajunQueen43 and our special guest, and also Lego Man, known as Robert Morss. We have him on the line right now, and he is going to give us a history lesson and hopefully a continued history lesson from now on. Thank you for calling in, Rob.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I love your call sign. I love everything about this podcast. This is so clever and great. So it's a pleasure to be here. Yes, my name is Robert Morss, aka the Lego Man. That's what my friends call me, at least. But yeah, so I'm happy to be here. And for those of you who don't know, I was actually a high school history teacher before I was arrested for my involvement at the events on the Capitol steps on January 6th. But that was 2 years ago. I was actually arrested on the last day of school wearing my brown tweed jacket with the elbow pads, some dress blue slacks, my leather briefcase slung over my shoulder, and my Constitution ties. I was about to jump into my Wrangler to head to work. My life has not been the same since that day, June 11th, 2021. But we aren't here today to talk about my life. We're here today to talk about the lives of those who have left a permanent mark on our nation's history, and perhaps the lives of those who can hear my voice today who have yet to leave their mark on our nation's history. But we'll get to that later. Right now, I would like to put that classic tweed jacket with the elbow pads back on, at least in my mind, so I can relive my glory days as a teacher and take this wonderful audience back in time to an iconic moment in our nation's incredible history that secured our fate as an enduring country and changed the fate of the world. So, without further ado, I invite you to join me to go back in time to the Battle of New Orleans. So, the Battle of New Orleans took place during what's known as the War of 1812. This is the war where Great Britain came back to the newly founded United States to destroy that pesky little colony that they were attempting to be. They were trying to be free. So the War of 1812 actually erupted as a result of 15 years of relentless harassment from Britain upon the trade and immigration of America. Imagine, we just become a country from Great Britain. Great Britain didn't take that very well. They were actually really salty after the breakup. And so, like some lovers do, they try to sabotage the other, right? If they still have their feelings hurt, right? After the end of the breakup, that's exactly what Britain was doing, okay? So Britain was really messing with our trade and actually abducting American citizens and forcing them to join British employment at sea. So this is something that enraged Congress, and though Britain wanted their colony back, Congress was also willing to declare war upon Britain again. And so our Congress voted to initiate the War of 1812, and Great Britain saw this as an excellent opportunity to launch an enormous campaign in order to make those 13 audacious colonies submit once and for all. For all intents and purposes, this was Revolutionary War Round 2. The War of 1812 is also where we get our national anthem from, when Francis Scott Key witnessed the British attack of Fort McHenry, which is located in Maryland. But we are here to talk about a different campaign, because the British didn't just attack Maryland in the War of 1812. They actually burned down our White House. Things got that bad. They also waged a southern campaign on the expanding United States, down where, you guessed it, down in the Big Easy, down in New Orleans, Louisiana. But before we get into the details, I have some characters I would like to introduce. So first up is the individual known as Andrew Jackson, or as some of his fellow soldiers would nickname him, Old Hickory. Andrew Jackson was born in 1767 to Scotch-Irish immigrants on the American frontier. Notice how he was born before we officially became a country. During the Revolutionary War, he was active, but he was young. And he and his brother were actually captured by British soldiers And his brother, if I'm not mistaken, actually died while they were captive. And though his brother died, Andrew Jackson got away a little bit easier by only getting a slash across his face from a British officer's sword. But that is what developed a hatred, a deep hatred for British people and soldiers, especially within Andrew Jackson, that he carried on for the rest of his life. He's been in multiple duels. He actually, when he died, had 2 bullets lodged into his body from those duels that he survived. And I challenge your audience to check this stuff out in the American Lion book. This is where I'm getting some of this content from. Poor guy never knew his father, but that didn't let him stop him from his ambitions. He got into politics, into law, into military campaigns. He was actually voted into the House of Representatives of Tennessee. He actually helped draft the Tennessee Constitution and was in many militia campaigns. He was part of the militia general for Tennessee. And while practicing law, he kind of made a name for himself on his own, like that classic lift yourself up by your bootstraps story. That was Andrew Jackson. He gained a lot of prestige fighting with and alongside Native Americans during the Creek Indian Wars. After one of these battles, little known fact, he actually found an infant boy beneath his slain mother and adopted that Native child and raised him as his own son. A lot of people don't know that, but it doesn't sound like someone who hated all Native Americans. That sounds like someone who might have hated his enemy but respected them too, enough to raise his own child from someone else's mother. Jackson was a very intelligent individual, and he was, as most military men are, very observant. And so with war brewing, with the War of 1812 taking place, he was aware that the territory of America was expanding and that the Mississippi River might be a point of contention if the British were to invade and wage a southern campaign, which at this point in time they were. Now I'd like to introduce another individual. This is the British Army General, Sir Edward Packenham, and he had actually just gotten done fighting Napoleon in France. So this is a pretty seasoned dude, and he has now launched an armada to come set sail and arrive in the Gulf of Mexico to invade American soil in that southern campaign that we talked about. So Andrew Jackson, knowing this, he recognizes that the Mississippi River is a very strategic point for American interests. And he recognized that if the British could lock down New Orleans, which is the mouth of the Mississippi River, they could not only continue to invade the continental U.S. using that river as a point of access, but that river runs so far up the continental United States. I mean, think about that. If you can imagine the map of the United States, the Mississippi River goes through a large amount of territory. And the British, if they got their hands on that river, they could essentially stop the United States from expanding westward. Packenham knew that, and Jackson did too. And so Andrew Jackson seems to be the only one qualified and the only one left to prevent an invasion of British troops on the soil of the southern regions of our American territory at the time. So while that is taking off, Andrew Jackson figures out, wow, you know what? I need to head down to New Orleans. He might have wanted to go for Mardi Gras. I've been there. It's a great time, but he has some bigger fish to fry right now, ladies and gentlemen. He's got a country to save. And so he decides to head down to New Orleans and set up shop, analyze the terrain, and recognize what he's dealing with. So the mouth of the Mississippi featured 2 locations on the eastern and western banks and on the Rodriguez Canal that would be locations for them to try to repel British forces. Now, at the time, granted, we don't have GPS and we don't have a lot of satellite imaging back in the 19th century, so this is based off of maps and whatnot. And Old Hickory is wise with his can count, and he's starting to realize that if the rumors are true, Packingham has a lot more people showing up to New Orleans than Andrew Jackson does. So now he begins a very desperate campaign, if you will, to enlist more men for help. So Andrew Jackson didn't have enough men. The British unleashed an armada headed for the Gulf of Mexico and were going to land in New Orleans any day after Christmas. Jackson had to enlist anyone and everyone who was willing to fight the British. But luckily, at the time, the British had made many enemies throughout the world who would take any opportunity to spill Redcoat blood. Jackson capitalized off of this global vendetta that the people of the world had against Great Britain, and he was actually able to get the help of some people that may or may not have been included in our history books, but definitely deserve the credit, because without them, we might not have the country that we do today. So just to name a few of these different types of people that helped fight on behalf of America's interests in the War of 1812 at the Battle of New Orleans were Creek and Choctaw Native Americans, several states worth of militia members. There were freed slaves. There were Spanish tradesmen that also pitched in to help fight in this ragtag motley crew of Jackson's now growing army. Now, they all were willing to repel the inevitable invasion, but as the defenses were being built and prepared, Jackson, as the observationalist that he is, realized that, you know what, America would need more fighters if she were to remain free. Jackson knew what he had to do. He just had to swallow his pride first before he could do what was necessary to save his home. I shall now introduce an additional character to the tale. Deep within the brackish water of the haunted bayou, there was rumored to be an impenetrable pirate fortress that was almost impossible to find, and which...
So in the meantime, I sure hope y'all are enjoying the history lesson. I am enjoying it, that's for sure. I haven't heard anyone talk about the Battle of New Orleans website, my store website. And you can go to that by going to angelspatriotbattle.org. Hey.
Hey, thank you for your patience. I appreciate you.
Oh, no problem. You can just start off right where you left off.
Oh, perfect. All right, let's do this.
Go ahead.
I shall now introduce an additional character to the tale. Deep within the brackish water of the haunted bayou, there was rumored to be an impenetrable pirate fortress that was almost impossible to find, and was home to the legendary French pirate Jean Lafitte and his mercilessly lethal yet efficient smuggling crew. They used these mysterious waters to conceal their less than professional efforts to make a living, and Andrew Jackson knew that Jean Lafitte and his crew were the only men capable of doing battle with the British and succeeding, if only he could find them within their secret swampy fortress of lawlessness and solitude. Desperate times call for desperate measures, though, as the saying goes, and Andrew Jackson ventured into the bayou to enlist the help of a man in whom the only thing they had in common was a mutual hatred for the British. Now, not much is left of Jean Lafitte to recall from history, though he is well known as a 19th century French pirate. Much of his life has been lost to the sands of time or to the secretive swamps he called home. However, there is some good news. If you find yourself in New Orleans, this is actually really cool. Make sure that you stop by Lafitte's. I'm just going to kick off right where I began talking about Jean Lafitte. Not much is left of Jean Lafitte's legacy. Though he is well known as the 19th century French pirate, much of his life has been lost to the sands of time or the secretive swamps he called home. However, there is good news. If you find yourself in New Orleans, please make sure to stop by Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop Bar. This can be found on Bourbon Street of New Orleans, and it's perhaps the oldest bar in the United States. but it's actually used by the famous French pirate Jean and his brother Pierre Lafitte as a front for their smuggling operations, and which actually housed a blacksmith shop there in that building that has been converted into a bar. But if you walk inside and if you check it out, which I have personally been there before and it's absolutely incredible, you will now understand the significance of the name that is by the door and who helped save America. It seems that the French would have contributed to confirming America's independence a second time in history based off of this. So that's some cool tidbit knowledge there for you for New Orleans and its awesome history. So together with the help of the French pirate Jean Lafitte and his band of brave brigands, in addition to the freed slaves, Creek and Choctaw Native Americans, Spanish tradesmen, militia members from surrounding communities, and anyone else who was capable of fighting, on January 8th, 1815, the soldiers of Great Britain met this motley crew on the field of battle. Now, the battle didn't take very long. In fact, due to the supreme tactical capability of Andrew Jackson and all of his clever and incredible contributions to his army, they were actually capable of repelling the soldiers of Great Britain, and dealt over 2,000 casualties. And so that Edward Packingham guy that we talked about, right, that general who had actually just got done fighting Napoleon in France, ended up dying at the Chalmette battlefield in Louisiana because of this battle. It was absolutely a huge, devastating loss to Great Britain. And on January 8, 1815, the soldiers of Great Britain were once again kicked out of America because of the courageous sacrifice of our nation's heroes. Now, I wanted to bring this up for a couple of reasons, right? A lot of people were capable of learning a little bit of the history of the Battle of New Orleans because of a song that was written by Jimmy Driftwood, literally called the Battle of New Orleans, who was actually a school teacher that often used folk music to help educate his students lessons about history. Mr. Driftwood wrote the song in 1936 to help his class remember our nation's incredible history. And as the only teacher that has been caught up in this January 6th mess, I want to use this unforgettable story of heroism and unity that took place down in the Big Easy to communicate a similar message to perhaps an even larger audience. So, for example, you will notice that the cultures and ethnicities of the men who fought at Chalmette Field were extremely varied, diverse, and so different that orders had to be given in 5 different languages. Could you imagine that? It's hard enough being in combat and trying to understand what someone is telling you in English. I was a ranger, so I kind of have a little bit of experience with this. But 5 different languages in the combat of war, man, that had to have been chaotic. But that didn't stop these men from all over the different walks of life from succeeding that day. And I'd like to argue that the 2 themes that bound these very different people together to stand shoulder to shoulder with one another that day and trust one another with their lives was the reason for it. The first reason was a unanimous desire for liberty, not just for themselves, but also for their children. And the second theme, or the second reason, was a realization that we are stronger together, and no power of hell or machination of man can stand up to a united American people. And I do believe those 2 components are the greatest theme and one of the biggest takeaways from the Battle of New Orleans. That piece of timeless wisdom is a lesson that was not only written in blood within the formation of our country and the legendary Chalmette Fields of New Orleans, Louisiana, during the War of 1812, that understanding is also written in our hearts. To triumph over a greater evil, one must overlook lesser divisions in order to achieve victory. Now, since I know that I'm not only talking to people that have been around the sun a multitude of times, but also the next generation. I'd also like to branch out to the younger folks within the audience that might also relate here. If you think about it, all of those comic book and superhero nerds out there, I know you're out there. That is also why we love the Avengers movies and or comics that are from Marvel. Because they feature completely unique and different people coming together to save and or avenge their home. Very similar to what happened in New Orleans in 1815. Now, if you ask me, the Battle of New Orleans was kind of like America's first Avengers movie. A bunch of people coming together to fight for a cause that's bigger than their own, people uniting that might not have been able to handle the threat by themselves, but together they were forced to be reckoned with. That's ultimately what happens in every Avengers movie. There's been a couple of them now since the first one came out, I think, in like 2012, which I was a huge fan of. But if you ask me, the Battle of New Orleans was America's first official Avengers movie. But if you want my opinion, it will also not be the last. Now, those who can hear my voice today are also caught within an Avengers movie, whether you realize it or not. Your enemy we face today that has affected us all, regardless of color, culture, or where within this great country we come from, is a slow development of a tyrannical government on our own soil. Our worst nightmares of our founding fathers have come back to haunt their children. The very monster they personally fought in their own lifetime to put into the ground is now like a devouring and relentless zombie blatantly pursuing each and every American liberty and property as if it were back.
Sorry.
As if it were back to our nation's tumultuous origins. America having political prisoners is literally evidence of this very claim. I am living proof that our government has turned into the very thing our founding fathers wanted to destroy, and because of its desire to turn its back on its people and our constitutional principles. So after the battle at New Orleans, not only did enormous odds get overcome by the ragtag motley crew ensemble of America's defenders, who defeated the better trained, better funded, and superior force of the British Army, this victory established the global notion that America was here to stay. We were a force to be reckoned with because of the unity we displayed that day, and we still are, if we're willing to recognize, like Andrew Jackson of old, the necessary need to humble yourself in order to have an ally for a fight, and that we too are being invaded. Not only is our southern border a mess, we are in an outrageous debt, and our own laws are being used against us, which, if you read our Declaration of Independence and recite the 27 complaints to the King, they sound eerily similar to what we're all dealing with now. We are also being invaded within our hearts and our minds. We are being led to believe that our country's history is loaded with nothing but scum, villainy, and division. When I just told you a story of honor, heroism, and unity amongst men of all colors, and that is what kept New Orleans free, and our nation free at large. We are being bought off with false promises of instant gratification and apparitions of comfort, and opportunities to embrace cowardice, instead of understanding that the hardest roads are the ones that pay off the most, that God hates a coward, and we are not descended from fearful men, and ultimately that the truth, though it might be initially painful, will set you free. I challenge your listeners to be someone who, like Jackson, Lafitte, and his French pirates, the Choctaw Indians and the freed slaves that fought side by side to leave their mark on our nation's history, to unite against the tyranny that has developed on this land, and to participate in our American Avengers movie. Like our forefathers of old, to rescue this land from the clutches of tyranny and despotism. And you might not even want to do it for yourself. In fact, don't. Do it for the next one in line. Be brave for your kids. because that is the same reason our founding fathers decided to declare independence from Great Britain in the first place. That moment of courage was not for them. Old Hickory and his allies didn't fight on the fields of Chalmette for themselves. They did this, and they fought for what was right. They did this for their posterity. They faced their fears and risked it all for you. And I challenge you and all of your listeners and all of your friends to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that was great. It was wonderful. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
And it's fixing to hang up on us.
That was your friendly neighborhood Lego man. Thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, look forward to some more. Can't wait for the next one.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, thank you very much, Angela. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, I don't want it to hang up on us. Talk to you soon.
Yes, ma'am. I can't wait. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you for listening to JULIETSIX. This is CajunQueen43, and I'm signing off. And our special guest, Robert Morss, aka the Lego Man, has signed off, and we look forward to some more. Y'all have a blessed rest of y'all week and enjoy the weekend. Y'all have a good evening. Bye for now.